So, not too long ago, Disney ended up dropping the trailer for Zootopia 2, the long-awaited sequel to the 2016 animated film Zootopia. The original Zootopia was a huge critical hit and actually won Best Animated Feature the year it came out. It was also a very big commercial hit for Disney as well, since it made over $1 billion, so a sequel was inevitable. A lot of people have definitely been anticipating this sequel, and it looks pretty promising overall, especially based on the trailer, since there's new species like birds and reptiles being introduced. But unfortunately, it looks like a certain group of reviewers on both YouTube and other platforms have seen this trailer and aren't happy about it at all. I'm talking about none other than anti-woke animation critics who have seen this trailer and apparently think it's woke propaganda for some reason and are hoping it'll fail. Anti-woke animation critics are a pretty infamous group of reviewers on YouTube overall who often just get mad if an animated show has a person of color in it or something of a minority overall. If there's even the slightest amount of diversity in a product, they'll automatically call it woke propaganda and hope it'll fail. Rather than looking at an animated product critically and looking at the things you should look at when criticizing animation, such as storytelling, visuals, character development, pacing, and things like that, they'd rather get mad that Zootopia 2 happens to have a female rabbit in the lead role. Which is kinda weird they're just now getting mad at this because Zootopia 1 also had a female character in the lead role. Huh, funny how that works, isn't it? So today I'll be taking a look at anti-woke animation criticism, why it's not real criticism, and what real animation criticism should look like overall. To start, let's look at one of the more notorious channels on YouTube that covers anti-woke criticism, that being Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is a pretty notorious grifter on YouTube overall who tends to lean into a lot of anti-woke politics, but he also talks a lot about movies on occasion as well, including the time he made a quote-unquote review of Sonic 3, which just boiled down to him complaining that he had to go to the theater to see the film with his kids.
In fact, one person told me that my negative comments had upset, and I'm repeating this phrase verbatim, had upset the quote, Sonic community. This is a movie, like so many kids' movies these days, that schizophrenically darts back and forth from being ironic to painfully self-serious to goofy to earnest.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
Huh, wow, he sounds like a great dad. But Matt Walsh is also notorious for claiming that Disney is failing now because they've gotten too woke, clearly. Rather than choosing to look at Disney's films with any nuance and talking about what might be making them fail overall, such as storytelling, pacing, characterization, and the things that really matter when it comes to telling stories. However, he also is known for making the claim that apparently in his eyes, Disney has always been woke. And because of this, he actually made a video where he talks about all the different Disney villains that he thinks should be seen as good guys. Yes, you heard that right. Matt Walsh does have a video where he talks about many of the most iconic villains from Disney's 100-year history and talks about why they were right. No, I am not making this up. So, let's take a look at Matt Walsh's defense of each Disney villain's evil plan and why they were quote-unquote right in his eyes.
The truth is that even older Disney movies have issues. The problem is that in those films, in many cases, the alleged villains are treated, I think, very unfairly. They get a bad rap. In many cases, they are misunderstood, misconstrued.
I only wanted to help!
Okay, so right off the bat, Matt Walsh shows Syndrome from The Incredibles as an example of a villain that he thinks shouldn't be seen as a villain. So, Syndrome, somebody that builds an entire army of robots to kill superheroes because he's jealous that he couldn't be seen as a superhero by his idol in his childhood, and ends up committing a mass genocide against most superheroes overall, should be seen as a hero. Are you really sure about that one, Matt?
And look, maybe it's just my overabundance of empathy and compassion. You know, it gets me into a lot of trouble sometimes, and maybe that's what allows me to see it this way.
No, I think most people will tell you what Syndrome does in this film is just wrong. He goes and kills hundreds of people just because he's spiteful at them. There's not really an empathetic way to look at that. After this, Matt goes into another Disney villain that he thinks shouldn't be villainized, that being the hunters from Bambi.
We'll go through 5 movies. Number 1 is Bambi.
Wake up, we have company.
It's viewed as a classic because it happened to be released in the 40s, although it could have been released last year based on the fact that the villains in this movie are the hunters who shot Bambi's mom.
Okay, so what Matt is obviously trying to say here is that he thinks Bambi has a pro-vegetarian message, when in actuality it really doesn't. It just so happens that every single main character in this film is an animal. If every character in your film is a woodland animal, it would kind of make sense that a natural enemy would be the villain in the film, such as a hunter. I don't think Walt Disney had pro-vegetarianism in mind when making this film, so this just doesn't really make any sense.
Those hunters, I'm guessing, made some great venison steaks, maybe some deer jerky out of Bambi's mom, which is a fact that could have brought Bambi some comfort and solace if anyone had explained it to him, but they never did. Second, deer populations are out of control in this country. Like, they wreak havoc in ecosystems. They cause 1.5 million car crashes a year, including hundreds of fatalities. So deer hunters are performing a service, and yet they've been villainized in a movie that generations of bored children have been forced to watch. If Bambi's mom had not been shot and killed, she may have gone on to run into the road one night, causing a family returning home from dinner to veer off into a tree and die. Whole family.
Again, I think Matt is very much overthinking this and what the movie is trying to say. I don't think they were considering the overpopulation of deer and whether Bambi's mom would make a car crash or anything like that. I think they just wanted to tell a pretty simple, heartfelt story about woodland creatures. That's really all there is to it. But Matt appears to be extrapolating this and thinking Bambi is something that it really isn't. After this, Matt moves on to Scar from The Lion King as another Disney villain that he thinks is clearly misunderstood.
I'm not justifying what he did. Like, killing your brother, trying to kill your nephew is inappropriate.
Huh? Inappropriate? I think that trying to kill your nephew and your brother is a little more than inappropriate.
Also, I'm not saying that Mufasa deserves to be thrown off a cliff, but there's a fundamental moral dishonesty to Mufasa that I always found deeply troubling, even as a child, the first time I saw it. I even said to my parents, there's a fundamental moral dishonesty in this film, Mom and Dad. I said that to them.
Oh yes, clearly young 8-year-old Matt was saying this to his parents at that age, clearly. While sitting in the theater with his parents for The Lion King, he must have been contemplating the moral dishonesty that is present in this Disney film. Oh my god.
And here's why. He eats his own subjects. Okay, 1 minute, they're all celebrating the birth of his son. They're bringing gifts or whatever, they're cheering. And the next, they don't show this in the film, but Mufasa is hunting them down and consuming them. That's how Mufasa treated his subjects. And then he has the audacity to get all high and mighty towards Scar. You can understand Scar's resentment. And I'm not holding it against the lion for being a lion. I'm just saying that there's arguably a certain intellectual integrity in Scar's outlook and behavior that you don't find with Mufasa. That's my point.
Okay, so not really, because Mufasa himself actually does explain this in the film when Simba is asking him about it. With Simba being the heir to the throne, Mufasa tells him that he must respect all the creatures in the land. He also informs Simba about how even though they eat the antelope, when they die, their bodies are going to become the grass and the antelope will eat the grass, so they're all connected in the great circle of life. Funny enough, this is actually in stark contrast to how Scar ends up ruling the Pride Lands when he ends up seizing the throne. He doesn't respect this delicate balance and also lets the hyenas basically hunt whatever they want. Because of this, the Pride Lands end up getting overrun and a huge famine breaks out, with the lionesses not being able to find any food for themselves. So really, I think this on its own even shows a huge stark contrast to how Mufasa views ruling over the Pride Lands and how life should be respected there, as opposed to how Scar views it. I also find it funny that Matt tried to bring this up as a point against Mufasa and a point towards Scar when both of them still hunt antelope, just one does it better and is more respectful about it. Huh, funny how that works. After this, he gets into how he thinks that John Ratcliffe, the villain from Disney's Pocahontas, shouldn't be seen as a villain either.
The villains in this movie are the evil white Europeans who are portrayed as brutal, greedy barbarians, oppressing the innocent Native Americans who are all kind and generous and so in touch with nature that they can literally talk to the trees.
Good morning, child.
We talk about wokeness in Disney films. This was the beginning of Disney's long march into wokeness.
Okay, so no, quote-unquote wokeness is not the thing that destroyed Disney's Pocahontas and made it an undesirable film. The reason why Pocahontas is bad, in addition to all the major historical inaccuracies in the film, is because it's just such a boring film overall. This film was specifically designed as Oscar bait. Jeffrey Katzenberg, while still at Disney at the time, had seen the success of Beauty and the Beast and wanted to be able to make another film that could get nominated for Best Picture, like that one had. Because of that, he made the most bland white savior story ever that is rooted in actual American history but has pretty much no real history to it at all, since it includes a lot of weird magical things that still make it feel like a Disney movie, which is pretty odd. And what do you know, the film didn't get nominated for Best Picture and was a lot less financially successful than The Lion King had been the year before. Funny how that works. So no, wokeness did not ruin Pocahontas at all. The lame pursuit of an Oscar over trying to make a well-developed story is what killed it. You can't just look at a piece of media, see a person of color in it, and call it woke. That's not real criticism. You have to look at storytelling, pacing, characterization, cinematography, all those things that really make a film a film. That's ultimately what you should look at when criticizing a film, not this.
Well, you could argue that that march began with the vegetarian propaganda of Bambi, but in any case, the white settlers in reality were courageous and intrepid pioneers, not villains.
Not really, because if you look at a lot of the things the white settlers did, a lot of their actions towards the Native Americans could be seen as just straight up villainous. When Roman Catholics arrived in America, they would force their religion on American Indians and not allow them to preserve their own culture and religion. A lot of Native Americans were also just sold into slavery and abused. There really isn't glazing over a lot of the atrocities that happened around this time in history. But apparently Matt Walsh would like to do so in order to convince you that the white settlers that came to America were all total heroes and none of them did anything wrong. Yeah, sure, whatever you say, buddy. After this, he decides to say the evil queen from Snow White is totally justified for what she does because he thinks that she's a defender of home rights. No, I am not making this up. Let's take a look.
The whole Snow White fairy tale is really about home invasion and burglary. This woman barges into the home of these clearly mentally disabled old men.
Jiminy Crickets.
Who aren't even half her size, makes herself at home.
What a cute little chair!
Not really. Snow White was running in fear of being killed by the evil queen, so she took refuge in the nearest place that she could find. I do think that someone who is in danger of being killed isn't really going to be too picky about where they choose to hide, let alone the fact that the dwarves weren't even there when she got there. Also, not really sure how the dwarves mining for diamonds and saying things like Jiminy Crickets makes them mentally disabled. That's kind of weird.
And then when she dies, they put her in a glass coffin because they somehow had a full-size glass coffin lying around, which makes you question their motives, frankly.
Okay, so you were just trying to make the dwarves look pitiful by saying they were victims of home invasion, but now you're trying to make them look like killers by saying they had a coffin lying around? Make it make sense.
Which means the evil queen is maybe still evil, but her actions should at least be understood in proper context, and maybe you could argue that she even was an advocate for private property rights, and that's why she was so upset at Snow White.
No, she was not an advocate for private property rights. The reason why she wanted to kill Snow White is because she was jealous. She wanted to be the fairest of them all. That's literally the start of the movie. Everyone knows this, but apparently Matt Walsh doesn't. The jokes write themselves. But after this comes Matt's probably most egregious example of trying to justify a Disney villain's actions so he can claim that wokeness has always been ruining Disney. When here he gets to Gaston. Oh boy, he sure has some stuff to say on that.
Gaston is the quintessential villain who was actually the hero of the story. We're supposed to hate Gaston from the beginning because why? He's manly and in good shape? He eats a lot of eggs? Is that his crime?
No, we're supposed to hate Gaston from the beginning because he tries to force Belle into a marriage she doesn't want. We're supposed to hate him because he's an egomaniac who doesn't think about anyone except for himself. We're supposed to hate him because he's willing to kidnap Belle's father and hold her hostage in order to try to get Belle to marry him. We're supposed to hate him because he tries to manipulate an entire village into trying to kill a beast that very clearly has done no harm to Belle just because he thinks that Belle has feelings for the beast. Gaston has so many very clearly telegraphed red flags all over his character from the very start, but yet Matt Walsh just can't seem to pick up on that. Or really, the more likely answer is that he can, but he doesn't really want to say that, since instead he'd rather try to sell you on this idea that Beauty and the Beast is woke propaganda, that Gaston was always right. Yeah, because clearly everything Gaston does in this film is right. Sure.
You know, he wants to have children, he wants to have a family. It's a very lovely thing. Belle turns him down and pushes him into a mud pit. Total humiliation.
Yeah, he was humiliated for a reason because he was trying to force himself on Belle.
And yet by the end, Gaston is still willing to risk his life to rescue this woman from the clutches of a beast.
No, he's not trying to rescue Belle at all when that happens. He just wants her for himself, and he wants to defeat anyone that he thinks might be the object of her eyes instead. Because in his egomaniacal view, nobody else can have Belle except for him. He doesn't view Belle as a real person, just a sexy object.
Now, of course, poor Gaston, he didn't know about any of this. He didn't know that the beast was really a prince. He didn't know that the woman of his dreams had fallen in love with a giant mutant mountain goat. All he knew from his perspective was that Beauty had been imprisoned by a monster. Her own dad told Gaston that.
Who's got Belle locked in a dungeon?
A beast! A horrible, monstrous beast!
And so he rallies the troops. He marches off to fight for her and save her.
No, that's really not what happens in that scene at all. Maurice tells Gaston that a beast is holding Belle hostage, and yes, Belle, not Beauty, unlike what Matt says here. Can't even bother to get names right, apparently. And Gaston chooses not to take Maurice seriously in this situation. He literally calls him crazy old Maurice, and then he just tries to laugh it off. It's not even until way later in the film when Gaston figures out the beast is real when he's trying to hold Belle's father hostage, and she ends up showing everybody the beast in the mirror. And that's the moment he chooses to rally a mob to try to kill the beast, not because he wants to protect Belle at all, but because he wants to get rid of anyone that, in his perspective, might be a threat to him having Belle as a sexy trophy. That's literally it. Gaston is nothing but a selfish egomaniac. Really, there's no defending a character like Gaston or any of the other Disney villains that Matt showed in this video, as much as he'd like to try to claim that all Disney movies are woke propaganda. Nope, all the ones he showed here are just very competent animated films that appeal to a very broad age range and have very cutting, clear, dry villains. And most of these come from Disney's golden age too. Disney in general is often the biggest target that a lot of these anti-woke grifters tend to go after. Whether it's one of their newer projects or something made through Marvel, Lucasfilm, or Fox, or even one of these old classics too like Beauty and the Beast, to them all of Disney's stuff is bad and is clearly woke propaganda and only appealing to the modern audience. I find it wild they'll even try to say this about movies like Beauty and the Beast, which now came out almost 35 years ago. But believe it or not, Disney isn't the only animated target they've tried to go after before. They've also tried to go after Netflix, specifically for a show like She-Ra Princesses of Power. I imagine you can probably guess what some of their complaints against this show were. Specifically, a lot of them claim that the new She-Ra designs are too androgynous and bland as a result, and a lot of them say that the old designs from the original 80s cartoon are much better. One particular video talking about this is one from a user named Tactical Templar, who made a video called "I fully support AI art and artists losing their jobs." Let's see what she had to say.
So ladies and gentlemen, I think this may be one of the most controversial videos that I do because the art and entertainment cartel has very successfully over decades created this perception that artists are somehow an elite group that needs protection and they need to be treated somehow differently than every other group of people because they're more intelligent, sophisticated, enlightened.
I don't know about that, but I do think a lot of people would agree that artists are important to any culture. Heck, that's often how we're able to learn about past cultures from history, because we're able to find their art and learn about them through that. Seeing another culture's art is, in a lot of ways, getting a window into how they view life and the world around them. So I would very much say, in that sense, artists are really important. I think a really good example of this is actually the art piece 7,000 Oak Trees by Joseph Beuys. Joseph Beuys was a mid-20th century German artist known for his conceptual art pieces that often included an element of performance. In this case, this particular art piece was actually a response to urbanization that went hand in hand with the destruction of natural habitats in Kassel, Germany. Joseph worked with many volunteers over several years to plant exactly 7,000 oak trees in the city, with each also being accompanied by a monolith to show they were part of the art project. Not only did this end up being a really unique art project, it also served to educate people on the importance of preserving nature, which to this day is actually still something that's very much a big part of the culture in Kassel. So yeah, I would actually say that artists really do contribute a lot to preserving culture, or even in some ways changing culture for the better.
You have a studio that has the rights to all you She-Ra, for example. Now, some of you may not remember, but a couple years ago, there was a She-Ra remake, a readaptation. So they're going to take She-Ra and they're basically going to turn her into an androgynous looking boy character. That's essentially what happened. Oh, you just want to fap to this cartoon. Why would you care that this classic piece of entertainment is being turned into, fodder for these freaks? Why would you care that the characters are no longer allowed to be feminine?
I'll be completely honest, I think the new She-Ra designs actually stand out a lot more than the originals. If you look at pretty much all the original She-Ra designs, they pretty much all have the same facial structure, the same body type, the same hair often even. It gets to the point where if you were to look at a silhouette of the entire cast of the original She-Ra show, most of them would probably look the same. That stands in stark contrast to the Netflix reboot where each and every character design is so distinct. Honestly, I think in terms of giving each character a real feel of their own, this really is a good change. It feels so much more creative than just recycling the same design over and over.
And then it comes out that the person who was tasked with creating this redesign is, of course, an LGBTQ left-wing freak, a narcissistic loser who has to make everything about themselves, and, well, I'm non-binary and I identify like this, and so, of course, the main character is sort of like a lesbian, and like, all of that filth, all of that disgusting brain-rotted garbage has wormed its way into entertainment. Well, guess what? AI is going to worm it back out. These studios don't actually care about that. What they care about is making money. Now, they made a huge misstep going all in on wokeness and DEI because they thought that that was going to be the future. They thought that they were going to be able to keep the markets they had while bringing in a new group of people. What they didn't know is that these people don't have money, they're toxic, they're angry, they're stupid, they're pathetic, and they're disgusting. And everything that they generate is fruit from the poisonous tree. Everything that they touch and create ultimately leads to ruin and disaster.
Unfortunately, that's just not true because the She-Ra show actually ended up being a huge hit for Netflix and was able to get 5 seasons. It was praised for breathing new life into what had otherwise become a really stagnant and dull IP. I honestly think the new She-Ra show has a lot more interesting storytelling and by far way more interesting character designs and character development than the original show. And that seems to be the general consensus overall. But interestingly enough, it's not just American cartoons these grifters have gotten mad at, oh no. They've also tried to go and call anime woke as well, believe it or not. This has definitely seen a huge uptick in recent memory with the growth of these kinds of channels and also the growth of anime as a huge, massively popular art form. There's been things like people saying the Ramna 1/2 remake is quote-unquote woke because of the fact that Akane says she hates men in the show.
How many times do I have to keep telling you that it doesn't matter because I hate men?
Which is funny because if you look at the original show, she said the same exact thing there.
I really hate boys!
Funny that nobody called it woke then, huh? Probably one of the most notable examples of an anti-woke critic who often cracks down on anime and calls that woke is none other than Rev Says Desu, an anti-woke VTuber. Not too long ago, when the 3rd season of the acclaimed anime ReZero came out, he ended up doing a video on that and claiming that was woke too. Specifically, he found it woke due to some censorship that was found in the anime itself, so let's take a look at what he had to say.
Let's talk about the actual censorship, the real changes that are very observable with this 3rd season trailer. And it's pointed out by users like this saying, as the observant among light novel / web novel readers may have noticed, they have indeed censored both Capella's and Liliana's designs. Liliana's now features a sports bra and shorts rather than the skimpy bikini, and Capella's bra and bikini bottom also being made more modest. And here's a more up-close design of this third season trailer of the character Capella, and you can see they added a sports bra versus the bikini that she was wearing. Now, of course, this is a lolly character, so when people on Twitter see censorship of lolly characters, they cheer. And of course, as we always point out, that is a slippery slope, okay? When you start excusing censorship of things you personally don't like or find weird, it often continues until it starts censoring things that you do care about. It's a very slippery slope.
Because I'm pretty sure most people who like ReZero don't like it for lolly designs. That is such a weird and honestly kind of disturbing thing to single out about the show. I think most people who like ReZero just like it because it's a really unique isekai and has a really interesting protagonist too. Subaru Natsuki is honestly one of the most unique anime protagonists out there. He has an incredibly unique character arc too, starting off as a really selfish NET who ends up being transported into a isekai world, and because of this, he sees this as an easy avenue for him to try to get the life he thinks he deserves since he never got that back on Earth. However, after living in this new fantasy world for not too long at all, and also dying multiple times over and over, he quickly finds out that's not the case here. And this really causes him to have to look at himself and just change who he is. Not try to change his environment around him, or try to change the minds of people around him. It's incredibly deep storytelling like that, and really great world building too, that I think a lot of people like ReZero for, and also fan favorite characters like Rem, of course. Also, ReZero is one of the most faithful adaptations as well from its source material. So far, ReZero has not adapted all the light novels that it's based on yet, but for what it has adapted so far, it's honestly been really faithful to the source material. So, to be honest, I think that's really all people care about when it comes to an adaptation. They just want to see it faithfully retold. And ReZero is a really well done page-to-screen adaptation, so I think that's all people really care about. I don't think they care about quote-unquote censorship at all. Or at the very least, when it comes to anything outside of the core story. Honestly, I don't think them censoring this character is a bad thing at all, and honestly, it's still kind of uncomfortable to look at too, even like this. Personally, I think they should have censored this even more, but admittedly, this character is supposed to be very uncomfortable in the show, so that is obviously intentional. But really, censorship or not, it doesn't take away from the core story, so I'm not really sure why Rev is getting upset about this here.
Not to mention the fact that if you're going to be complaining about this stuff, she is still very raunchy. I mean, this is the censored design. She's practically wearing booty shorts with visible thong lines right here.
Huh, interesting. So then why are you still complaining about it, Rev? Seems kind of pointless you made this whole video on it then. If ReZero Season 3 had made drastic changes to the story and also censored things from the actual novel and its writing, I think that would definitely be something to complain about, but they didn't do that. It's still a really faithful page-to-screen adaptation, as it's always been, so I don't really see what there is to complain about here at all. Rev seems very intent on trying to sell the idea that ReZero is clearly being ruined by woke activists now, because now one character is slightly more censored than before. When, no, this really isn't the case. It's still the same story as it was before. Censoring a character's design doesn't really take away from that.
And we've seen this type of global standard and also other standards being forced upon, in particular, artists and Japanese artists. Look what happened through these payment processors. Look what that's done to places like Patreon. Remember back in the day, one of the first things in terms of fictional content that Patreon banned was lolly-related content. Well, look at them now. Patreon recently, we talked about this in a very recent video, they are now requiring artists who make not safe for work content to provide affirmative consent between fictional characters that they put in not safe for work situations. That's how ridiculous it is gone. It keeps getting worse and worse.
No, I think those guidelines should pretty much be in place on Patreon since they don't want to encourage disgusting behavior. I honestly find that pretty reasonable to enforce on the artists. Again, Rev is really just fixating on a character design than looking at the greater scope. ReZero, at the end of the day, is still a great story, and it's a story that a lot of people love. It's been untouched, and because of that, people still love it in anime form too. However, that being said, if you truly do want to criticize Season 3 of ReZero, there are definitely things you can throw at it, and no, it's not just censored character designs. I personally did have a few problems with Season 3 of ReZero. I felt the pacing was a little off and definitely much more rushed than the previous seasons had been. To me, the first season of ReZero is basically a perfect season of television. I think everything really comes together in that first season, from the pacing to the character development to everything else, the world building, it's just really well done. I admittedly do have some problems with the second season since I found it not as well paced, and I felt like things were kind of slowing down a bit more for my taste there, and I do wish we'd seen more development on Garfield especially. However, it's pretty much my opposite problem with season 3 since I feel like things go way too fast in that season. This also causes Garfield, again, to kind of lack development and also the new characters that are introduced in this season as well. I think things like that are absolutely what you should criticize seasons 2 and 3 of ReZero for, but ultimately a censored character design is not. You can't just look at a censored character design in season 3, call it woke, and call it a day. That's not real criticism. But believe it or not, it's not even just character designs that these people will call quote-unquote woke when it comes to animated media. They will also get upset and call it woke if they think a female character has taken too much of a center stage, or if they think a male character seems too wimpy or weak or depressed. To give a good example of both of these kinds of viewpoints, let's look at a video from the YouTuber Jester Bell where she says, "Why are all men in movies weak, depressed clowns?" Inevitably, in this video, she discusses how she feels a character such as Peter B. Parker from the Spider-Verse films is a weak, depressed clown, at least in her point of view.
Peter B. Parker from the Across the Spider-Verse and Into the Spider-Verse movie. Now, in Into the Spider-Verse, Peter B. Parker follows the trope of depressed, broken man who needs to rise above and is encouraged to do so by his younger counterpart. So you see, you have a good storyline and a good arc here. And then there was what they did with Peter B. Parker in the follow-up movie. In Across the Spider-Verse, we don't get much of Peter B. Parker, but when he shows up, he's all of a sudden in this pink robe and bunny slippers, pink slippers, running around endangering his child, and it's all played up for laughs as Miles is getting chased by every person in this spider society. Peter B. Parker, is not taking it serious at all. He's very carefree about it, and he's just played up as a silly goof.
Huh, funny, it's almost like he's not driven by fear, like you just said. As Jester Bell stated here, in the first Spider-Verse film, Peter B. Parker is depressed. And he does feel like his life is going nowhere, and he's incredibly jaded on the world around him as a result. And it's Miles and meeting the other Spider-Men that actually makes him change his worldview. And it also makes him change as a person. He ends up taking life by the reins and not living in fear anymore. He ends up proposing to Mary Jane and they have a kid together. That's specifically reflected here in Across the Spider-Verse, showing him at probably his best that he's ever been in a long time. He's at a place in life now where he can finally just be happy. And that's a good thing. He's not really weak, depressed, or a clown here. I'm not really sure where you got that from. I would not say whatsoever that Peter B. Parker is played off for laughs in Across the Spider-Verse. He's just as much of a character as he was in the last film. So, no, in this case, Peter B. Parker is not a weak, depressed clown. There is no quote-unquote wokeness going on with his character at all. But let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum here, where a lot of these anti-woke critics will get mad if a female character happens to take center stage in something. A great case in point being the upcoming Pixar film Toy Story 5, which has actually been announced to have Jessie as a big starring role in it. This honestly really doesn't come as a surprise because since Toy Story 2, Jessie has always been a big part of the Toy Story cast in general. But of course, a lot of the anti-woke critics saw this and immediately thought Toy Story was going woke and called Jessie a girl boss. Oh boy, let's look at a video that Geeks and Gamers made on this subject.
And now here we are with Toy Story 5, and as you see the headline right there, Toy Story 5 will have a big focus on Jessie. Boy, oh boy, they never learn, do they?
Okay, so to be completely honest, I don't really think Jessie having a big feature in Toy Story 5 is anything to complain about at all. Like, she's kind of been a crucial part of the film series ever since the second one, and in the second one, she was one of the major players. Her scene where she opens up about her past is one of the most tear-jerking and heartfelt scenes in the entire Toy Story franchise, and a lot of people remember it for that reason. She became a major part of the Toy Story ensemble after that, being a big part of films 3 and 4 as well. And the thing is, she actually has taken the main role in a piece of Toy Story media before even, that being Toy Story of Terror. Toy Story of Terror was actually a TV special that Disney aired on ABC around Halloween time. And this one saw all the toys staying at a mysterious hotel that they thought was haunted, and a lot of the toys mysteriously disappearing, leading Jessie to have to go and find them and rescue them. This was also a big moment for her personally, since this is where she got over her claustrophobia and fear of being put in a box. So really, as much as geeks and gamers would like to try and sell you on the idea that Jessie being a main character makes Toy Story 5 woke, that just isn't true. And this post doesn't even say that she's the main character in Toy Story 5, that's just kind of jumping to conclusions. All it really says here is that she'll have a big part to play, and that's it. For all we know, it could just be the same kind of role that she's had in 2, 3, and 4, where she's still an important part of the team. And like, even if she is the main character, or at least is a main focus, that's not really gonna be something that detracts from it as seen in Toy Story of Terror. That special was received really well, and for good reason. I think the real thing you should criticize Toy Story 5 for, though, is just existing at all. Like, it just really doesn't need to happen. Heck, I'd even argue that Toy Story 4 didn't need to happen. For me personally, I always found Toy Story 3 to be that perfect ending to a great trilogy. And honestly, in a lot of ways, I think you could see it as capping off the first 15 years of Pixar as a studio. In a lot of ways, that film was them looking at the past 15 years of them as a studio and the hearts they touched and where it had all began with Toy Story 1. And I think the ending to Toy Story 3 is a perfect send-off to Buzz, Woody, Jessie, and the rest of the toys. I personally dislike Toy Story 4 for unwrapping that ending and then putting what I consider a lesser ending over that. And for me personally, I feel like that's what Toy Story 5 is gonna do as well, just unwrap a lesser ending and put an even lesser ending over that. I think this franchise should have ended at Toy Story 3, and there are absolutely things you can criticize Toy Story 5 for on that front. However, you can't just look at the fact that Jessie is gonna play a big role in it and call that woke. That's not real criticism. Overall, anti-woke animation criticism really isn't criticism at the end of the day. Rather than looking at the things you should look at when criticizing animation overall, such as character writing, storytelling, pacing, cinematography, scenery, all the things that really do matter when criticizing animation, these guys would rather get mad if there's a strong female character in a piece of animation, or get upset if they think a character design isn't fitting to how they'd like it to be. It really isn't real criticism, and it's just kind of disappointing to see this overall. I think in a lot of ways, stuff like this can really lead to a lack of media literacy. But thankfully, there are a lot of animation critics out there that I think really do analyze this medium as you should be. I'd like to take this time to recommend some animation critics for you to check out that I think do a good job of criticizing animation overall. I'll also be shouting out just a few general film critics here as well, since there were some that I didn't get to talk about in the initial film criticism video. I'll be putting these people's links in the YouTube description for easy access for you all. First up is Gaming Magic 13. This is a really good critical channel that looks at a lot of Pixar stuff such as Toy Story, The Incredibles, Cars, and things like that. He's also looked at things like The Owl House before, and also some live action movies like Indiana Jones, and offers a really good perspective on that, so I really recommend him for sure. Another one I really recommend that is more of a general film critic but also really good is Django Disc. Django Disc is a really good channel that talks a lot about what film criticism should really look like in the modern age as well, and some of the problems that come with YouTube film criticism. He also is just very passionate about film very clearly as well, and has done a lot of videos on what being a cinephile means too, so definitely go check him out, very worthwhile content there. Another one I very much recommend is Stripe the Squid, who has talked a lot about cartoons before and also things relating to Disney and DreamWorks animation. He covers a pretty wide variety of types of animation on his channel, and also he's talked about autism representation in media before, which is something that I think a lot of my audience would probably like, so definitely go give him a follow. The last one I want to recommend for animation critics you should definitely check out is Sunnyland Productions. He gives a very thoughtful analysis on shows like The Owl House, Phineas and Ferb, and also does theme park content too, so if you want to see things covering Universal Studios or Disneyland, definitely check him out. He's got a really great wide variety of content and is a great friend of the channel too. Overall, anti-woke animation criticism really isn't criticism just as much as anti-woke game or film criticism isn't either. I think more now than ever, to me, it's more important than ever to highlight what real criticism should look like, and that's what I want to lift up here on the channel. But what do you think? Am I wrong? Are these critics actually right? Are they offering real criticism? And what are some some of your favorite animation criticism channels on YouTube overall. Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, since I make a lot of content like this overall covering film and animation related topics, so if you like this video, you'll probably like the others I have planned as well. This weekend, I'm looking to put out a video on Barry and Max, a fantastic stop-motion animated movie about an autistic man, so keep an eye out for that. If there's a specific piece of media you think I should cover here on the channel overall, be sure to join my Discord, where we have a suggestions and questions channel where you can suggest that here. You can also check out my letterbox to see movies and shows, oftentimes movies and shows that I've reviewed there that I won't review here directly on YouTube. Special thanks to my patrons DDC1996 and Trayvon Gibson for supporting me that way also. Also thanks to my YouTube members You the Guardian, David Deister, Jared the Rabbit, and Balth Games for supporting me on there too. I really appreciate you all a ton, and I appreciate you for coming to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. But for now, I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye!